So this should be a short one because not much happened and it wasn't a very good episode. Hey everyone, my name is Levi and I want to talk to you about Last of Us Episode 6. If you watched my last review, I'm sorry. It wasn't very good. I was just trying some stuff out. But if you did watch my last review, then you know that I thought last episode, episode 5, was pretty good. It had what I wanted to see for the most part in an episode of a show based on the Last of Us video game. It had some drama, it had some action, it had emotional growth for our two main characters, it carried the story forward well, and it had the infected, which is kind of an important thing. This episode had none of that. Just throw all that out the window and tell a boring-ass story that goes basically nowhere. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through the entire episode. I'm just going to talk about a few parts that I found interesting, which there weren't many. A whole lot of nothing happens in this episode. So we'll start at the beginning of the episode. I did kind of enjoy the older couple in the cabin that give Ellie and Joel some directions as to where they're going. It was just a lighthearted way to get through some exposition. I don't think that in this world that they built, there would be people of that size there for a couple reasons. One being that it's hard work living on your own out in the woods, trying to keep alive, no power. There's probably a lot of wood cutting, a lot of farming, a lot of physical activity. And another being that the processed foods and the garbage that make us fat wouldn't be available. You'd be eating some pretty clean stuff. Meat and whatever fruits and veggies you could grow or scrounge up. I don't think that'd be big fat people, morbidly obese people in the fungus apocalypse. The majority of this episode takes place in the town where Joel's brother Tommy lives. Joel and Ellie are rounded up in the beginning by some guys on horseback. They take him to the town and nothing happens. We do get to see Ellie eat again, which is a terrible thing. Everything about the way this character eats is disturbing. I don't know if it was the director's choice, the actor's choice, or what, but it's a really bad choice. The way she grips the fork, the scraping of her fork on her teeth, just why? We also get to see Joel's complete emasculation. At first I thought he was having some sort of heart attacks because, he's older and he's lived a really tough life. But it turns out they're just anxiety attacks. He's having panic attacks because he's scared. He's worried about not being able to protect Ellie. And my mind went immediately to Rooster Cogburn in True Grit and how the relationship between him and the girl in that movie was similar to Joel and Ellie's relationship. Grumpy, murderous old man taking girl across the country for whatever reason, but at the end, you come to realize he cares for her and she cares for him, and they've helped each other grow in ways that they needed to grow. But Rooster wasn't a little bitch about it. But this is what I've been talking about from episode 1 with Joel and the change to his character, his motivations, and his overall demeanor. This is kind of where I feared they'd take it, and I was right. Another thing that happened in this episode made me think that a woman wrote or directed this episode, and I was right. I looked it up. And it was a scene where Ellie gets her Diva Cup. And though it's not really a big deal, it is one of those weird things that doesn't need to be in the episode, but is put in there for whatever reason. I'm still waiting on the day when we will see Joel struggling with his swollen prostate and having to pee 6 times a night and how dangerous that is with, the infected walking around. But we probably won't get that, and I don't want it. We also get told that the town that they're living in is a communist town, which is why it's so great. They try to play it off as though they're not leaning into that as a positive. A little later on, Joel and Ellie are having a conversation about the communist utopia and if the rest of the world was like that at one time, and Joel says no, it wasn't like that, and it wouldn't have worked out anyways because the country was too big, there were too many people. And I think that's their attempt at saying, hey, we're not saying it would work here, but they are saying it would work given the right circumstances. And apparently the right circumstances are killing off anyone who threatens your little society there, which they did, which is true to most communist regimes in history. Not to mention that in the real world, the world we're living in, communist countries have typically looked like the rest of the fungus-infected world, whereas more freedom-loving, democratic, capitalistic societies tend to look more like what's inside the walls of the town. But don't worry about that, because it's in your head. On some subconscious level, you're going to connect that peaceful, wonderful town with communism. That's how they do it. They do a pretty good job doing it, too. There's also another point at which Tommy's wife, the one who declared their town a communist town, tells Ellie to be careful who you place your faith in. She says, the only people who can betray us are the ones in whom we place our trust. That mindset can't possibly work in a communist society. The point of communism is trusting everyone around you to do what they need to do in order to make this society work. Everyone around you has to pitch in. The idea of trusting everyone around you to be good people and to work hard for the betterment of your communist society. Being careful who you put your faith in and who you trust would be the mindset that led towards the democratic republic that we have in our country. Checks and balances, that sort of thing. Those were put in place because we don't trust those in power. So anyways, nothing happens in the town. Joel has panic attacks, Dixie Cup, communism, and then they leave. This is where they have a conversation that I mentioned before, where Ellie asks about communism and if the whole world was like that at one point. And Joel says there's basically two kinds of people in the world at that time. Those who wanted to own everything and those who didn't want anyone to own anything. And it's true. The only problem is both those groups are the same group of people. That's the people in power. That's the elites. That's the government. They want to own everything, and they don't want any of us to own anything. And we're supposed to be happy about it. And then Joel basically declares himself a libertarian. He says, I just wanted to do my job and be left alone. So far through this episode, I felt nothing. It's been boring. It's been lame. It's just kind of dragged on and on. Then they reach the hospital, and I felt a little suspense for a moment. The music became tense, and memories from the game kicked in. Now, in the game, in order to make it into the hospital, you have to sneak around and get past a bunch of infected. In this episode, they just walk in. They just stroll in to an empty building. And at this point, I got the feeling that whoever directed this episode, whoever wrote and directed this episode, didn't care for the source material. Whoever wrote and directed this episode didn't care for the source material. Previously in other episodes, whenever there was an Easter egg or scenes taken directly from the game, it flowed naturally and I enjoyed it. It seemed as though they were doing for the fans what the fans wanted to see. In this episode, it seemed as though they knew they had to, but they didn't want to. So what we get are a couple of lines that are thrown in that are so heavy-handed and direct that it's almost insulting. So as they're walking around this empty building, Ellie walks up to a filing cabinet or some sort of table or something and says, there were definitely doctors here. Thanks for telling us, Ellie. The very next line that's spoken is by Joel. He picks up a piece of paper with a list on it and says, it's a packing list. That's a list you make when you're moving. And it just felt like whoever wrote this was thinking, you know what, video games are dumb. People who play video games are dumb. Let's just write this for dumb people. So from there, they make plans to go to the next place, Salt Lake City, apparently. But then some hooligans show up, some ruffians, some bandits, and they just happen to be at this hospital at the same time that Ellie and Joel are. Joel and Ellie decide to jump on the horse and get out, but one of the guys rushes to attack them. And this is just another dumb case of bad gun handling. While Joel wrestles the guy and eventually kills him, strangles him, breaks his neck, Ellie has her gun pointed directly at his back. Finger on the trigger, just pointed directly at Joel's back. Just a little thing. Drove me crazy. I think that's something that in the montages earlier, Joel teaching her how to handle a gun and stuff, that he would have taught her immediately, but apparently not. They get away. Don't worry. They get away from the bad guys from the hooligans. Does it happen in an exciting fashion? No. They just jump on the horse and ride away. Then Joel falls off the horse because he's wounded, and that's how the episode ends. This episode sucked. It's not giving me much hope for the next 3 that are going to wrap up the series. It's not giving me much hope for the next 3 that are going to wrap up the season. And I'm already kind of not wanting to watch season 2. I think I'll probably put this at number 2 for the worst of the episodes. I don't know. I really didn't like this episode. It might be number 1. In any case, I don't really have much else to say, so I'm going to call it quits. I hope you guys have a good one. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below. Also, comment. Let me know where I got it wrong and what you agree with. And if you would, I'd appreciate it if you'd head over to my Spreadshirt page. I've got some designs over there. Maybe you could buy a t-shirt or a sticker. I'll leave the link in the description below. Have a good one.